pervasive in modern life, more universally experienced and yet more profoundly misunderstood than anxiety. It has become the background noise of contemporary existence, the constant companion that shadows us through our days and haunts our nights. And yet, for all our attempts to understand it, to treat it, to manage it, to overcome it, anxiety persists. Indeed, it seems to grow stronger, more insistent, more inescapable with each passing year. The question we must ask ourselves is not simply how to eliminate anxiety, how to make it go away, how to live without it. These are the wrong questions, questions that arise from a fundamental misunderstanding of what anxiety actually is. The real question, the question that goes to the heart of the matter, is this: what is anxiety trying to tell us? What is this experience revealing about the nature of the self, about the structure of consciousness, about the way we have learned to relate to our own existence? Anxiety is not, as we so often assume, simply an illness to be cured, a disorder to be corrected, a symptom to be eliminated. Anxiety is a signal. It is a message from the deepest layers of our being, attempting to communicate something of vital importance. And the message is this: the way you are trying to live is fundamentally at odds with the nature of reality itself. The way you are attempting to secure yourself, to protect yourself, to guarantee your future, to control your life, this entire project is based on an illusion. And anxiety is the feeling that arises when this illusion is threatened, when reality presses against the walls of the fictional fortress you have constructed around yourself. Let me be more specific about what I mean. At the core of anxiety is the sense of being a separate self, an isolated entity, fundamentally disconnected from the world around it. This separate self experiences itself as vulnerable, as threatened, as perpetually at risk. It feels that it must defend itself against a potentially hostile universe. It must secure itself against an uncertain future. It must control circumstances to ensure its own survival and well-being. And so this separate self engages in a constant project of self-protection and self-advancement. It tries to think ahead, to anticipate dangers, to plan for contingencies, to secure guarantees. It attempts to achieve a state of absolute safety, absolute security, absolute certainty. And anxiety is what happens when this project fails, when the impossibility of achieving such absolute security becomes apparent, when the future refuses to be controlled, when life demonstrates its fundamental unpredictability and uncontrollability. But here is what we fail to understand. The separate self that feels anxious, the isolated entity that feels vulnerable and insecure, this is itself an illusion. It is a fiction, a mental construct, a way of experiencing ourselves that we have learned, but which does not correspond to the actual nature of what we are. We are not, in fact, separate from the world. We are not isolated entities moving through a foreign environment. We are expressions of the world, manifestations of the universe, waves in the ocean of existence. When you truly understand this, when you see through the illusion of the separate self, anxiety cannot arise in the same way, because anxiety depends on the belief in separation, on the sense of being a vulnerable, isolated entity that must defend itself against an external world. Remove that belief, see through that illusion, and the ground from which anxiety grows is eliminated. But let me be clear. I am not suggesting that you can think your way out of anxiety, that you can simply decide to believe differently and thereby eliminate the feeling. The illusion of the separate self is not just an intellectual belief, it is a way of experiencing a structure of consciousness that has been built up over years of conditioning. It is woven into the very fabric of how you perceive yourself and the world. This is why anxiety persists, even when we know intellectually that our worries are often unfounded, that most of what we fear never comes to pass, that we have survived everything that has happened to us so far. The knowledge doesn't touch the anxiety because the anxiety is not arising from the thinking mind. It is arising from a much deeper level, from the basic sense of being a separate, vulnerable self. So what is to be done? How does one address anxiety at this fundamental level rather than simply trying to manage its symptoms? The answer lies in a kind of radical acceptance, a willingness to confront what anxiety is actually showing us, rather than constantly trying to escape from the feeling. When anxiety arises, our habitual response is to resist it, to try to make it go away, to distract ourselves from it, to think our way out of it, to reassure ourselves that everything will be okay. But all of these responses are forms of running away. We are treating anxiety as an enemy, as something wrong, as a problem to be solved. And in doing so, we actually reinforce the very structure that creates anxiety in the first place, the sense of a separate self that must protect itself against threatening experiences. What if, instead, we turn toward the anxiety? What if we allowed ourselves to feel it fully, without resistance, without trying to make it different, without needing it to go away? What if we investigated it, explored it, became curious about its actual texture and quality, rather than immediately believing the stories it tells us about danger and catastrophe? When you do this, when you actually allow yourself to be with anxiety, rather than running from it, something remarkable happens. The anxiety itself begins to reveal its own nature. You begin to see that anxiety is not actually about the future, not really about the specific things you are worried about. Anxiety is about the present moment, about right now, about the resistance to what is actually happening in this moment. Think about it carefully. When you are anxious, what is actually happening? You are here, now, in this moment. And in this actual moment, right now, there is no catastrophe. There is just this breathing, sensing, being aware. The catastrophe is in imagination, in thought, in the story about what might happen. But the anxiety itself, the actual feeling in the body, it is happening now. It is a present moment experience. And what is that present moment experience actually made of? If you observe it closely, without the overlay of thought, without the story about what it means, what do you find? You find sensations in the body, tightness in the chest perhaps, or a fluttering in the stomach, or tension in the shoulders. You find thoughts racing through the mind, imagining scenarios, rehearsing worries. You find an overall sense of contraction, of tightness, of bracing against something. But notice, all of these are present moment experiences. They are happening now. And if you can simply be with them, if you can allow them to be exactly as they are, without needing them to change, without adding resistance to them, something shifts. The anxiety is still there, but your relationship to it has changed. You are no longer caught in it, no longer identified with it, no longer believing that you are the anxiety. This is a crucial distinction. You are not your anxiety. Anxiety is something that is happening, an experience that is arising, but it is not what you are. What you are is the awareness in which the anxiety appears, the consciousness that knows the anxiety is present. And this awareness, this consciousness, it is not anxious. It simply witnesses the anxiety, holds it, allows it to be there without being disturbed by it. When you discover this, when you recognize yourself as the awareness rather than as the anxious thoughts and sensations, anxiety loses its power over you. It may still arise, it is a conditioned pattern, deeply ingrained, but it no longer controls you, no longer defines your experience, no longer seems like an emergency that must be immediately addressed. Now, let me speak about another dimension of anxiety, one that is particularly relevant to our time. Much of modern anxiety is not just about personal concerns, not just about individual worries and fears. It is about a collective sense of wrongness, a feeling that something fundamental is amiss with the way we are living, with the direction our civilization is heading. with the relationship between humanity and the natural world. This is what we might call existential anxiety, a sense that the very ground of our existence is unstable, that the systems and structures we have built our lives upon are failing, that we are rushing towards some catastrophe we can feel, but cannot clearly see. And this anxiety, unlike personal worry, cannot be addressed by positive thinking or stress management techniques, because it is pointing to something real, something true, the unsustainability of the way we are living, the fundamental disconnection from nature and from each other that characterizes modern life. This existential anxiety is, in a sense, appropriate. It is a sane response to an insane situation. The problem is not the anxiety itself, but what we do with it. Most people, when confronted with this existential unease, either become paralyzed by it or numb themselves to it. They either sink into depression and despair, or they distract themselves with entertainment and consumption, refusing to feel the full weight of what the anxiety is showing them. But there is another possibility. The existential anxiety, the sense that something is fundamentally wrong with our way of living, can become a catalyst for transformation. It can wake us up from the collective trance, can force us to question assumptions we have never questioned, can drive us to seek a different way of being in the world. This is what anxiety is for, in its deepest sense. It is not a mistake, not a malfunction, not something that should not be happening. It is a wake-up call. It is reality pressing against illusion, truth breaking through fantasy, life demanding that we pay attention to what we have been ignoring. The separate self that feels anxious, the isolated ego that experiences itself as vulnerable and insecure. This is not what we truly are. We are not separate from life. We are life. We are not isolated entities trying to survive in a hostile universe. We are expressions of the universe itself, the cosmos aware of itself through these particular forms. When this is realized, not just intellectually, but in direct experience, anxiety as we know it cannot exist. There may still be appropriate responses to danger, natural reactions to threatening situations. But the chronic background anxiety, the constant sense of insecurity and vulnerability, the perpetual worrying about the future, this falls away. Because it was always based on a case of mistaken identity, on taking yourself to be something you are not. Let me describe what life becomes like when you are no longer dominated by anxiety, when you have seen through the illusion that creates it. There is a quality of ease, of naturalness, of flowing with whatever is happening, rather than constantly resisting and trying to control. This does not mean becoming passive or irresponsible. It means acting from presence rather than from fear, responding to what is actually here rather than to imagined futures. There is also a capacity to be with difficulty, with uncertainty, with not knowing, without these states triggering anxiety, because you are no longer trying to achieve absolute security, no longer demanding that life be controllable and predictable. You have accepted the fundamental uncertainty of existence, the basic insecurity that comes with being alive in a constantly changing universe. And in accepting this, in surrendering the demand for absolute safety, you find a deeper security, not the security of having everything under control, but the security of knowing that you are fundamentally one with the process of life itself. There is a famous teaching that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The same could be said about anxiety. Before awakening, life happens and you are anxious. After awakening, life happens and you respond appropriately to what is actually here, without the overlay of chronic anxiety about what might happen. The things that used to trigger anxiety still occur. Challenges arise. Difficulties present themselves. Uncertainty remains. But your relationship to all of this has fundamentally changed. You are no longer fighting with reality, no longer demanding that it be different than it is, no longer trying to achieve an impossible state of absolute security. And in this acceptance, this surrender, there is a peace that the anxious mind has been seeking all along but could never find through its strategies of control and self-protection. Because the peace is not found in successfully controlling life. It is found in giving up the attempt to control life, in recognizing that you are not separate from life and therefore do not need to control it. Anxiety, at its root, is the feeling of being separate from the whole, disconnected from the source, cut off from the ground of being. It is the feeling that arises when you experience yourself as a separate self that must make its way through a potentially hostile world. And the cure for anxiety is not better strategies for self-protection, not more sophisticated methods of control, not more effective techniques for managing the feeling. The cure for anxiety is the realization that there is no separate self to protect, no isolated entity that needs securing. There is only this life expressing itself, consciousness knowing itself, the universe experiencing itself through infinite forms, and you are that, not a separate piece of it, trying to make your way through it, but the whole thing, appearing as this particular expression, this particular perspective, this particular wave in the ocean of existence. When this is truly understood, when this is realized in direct experience, rather than just held as an intellectual concept, anxiety simply cannot arise in the same way. The ground from which it grows has been removed. The illusion upon which it depends has been seen through. And what remains is not a different kind of anxiety, not a better managed anxiety, but the absence of anxiety altogether, or more accurately, the presence of what was always here beneath the anxiety, which is peace, presence, the simple joy of being alive. This is what anxiety has been trying to show you all along. Not that you need to be more vigilant, more controlling, more defended, but that the very project of defending a separate self is unnecessary, that the separate self you are trying to protect does not actually exist, that what you truly are cannot be threatened because it was never born and will never die. It is the eternal consciousness in which all experiences, including anxiety, appear and disappear like waves on the ocean, like clouds in the sky, like thoughts in the mind. So do not hate your anxiety. Do not make it your enemy. Do not see it as something wrong with you, some deficiency that needs correcting. See it for what it is, a messenger, a teacher, a pointing toward truth. It is showing you where you are still holding on, still contracting, still believing in separation. It is inviting you to let go, to relax, to trust the fundamental process of life of which you are an inseparable part. And when you accept this invitation, when you stop running from anxiety and instead turn toward it with curiosity and acceptance, when you allow yourself to feel it fully without resistance, you may discover something quite wonderful. You may discover that beneath the anxiety, beneath the thoughts and sensations and stories, there is a vast stillness, a profound peace, an unshakable okayness that has been here all along, waiting patiently to be recognized. This is not something you achieve. It is not something you become. It is what you are, what you have always been, obscured only by the belief in a separate self that needs protecting. And anxiety, paradoxically, is one of the experiences that can lead you back to this recognition if you are willing to investigate it deeply rather than simply trying to make it go away. So the next time anxiety arises, do not immediately reach for distraction or reassurance. Pause, breathe, turn your attention toward the anxiety itself. Feel it in your body. Notice the thoughts it generates. Observe the stories it tells. But do not believe these stories. Do not identify with these thoughts. Simply witness them, as you might witness weather passing through the sky. And ask yourself, who is aware of this anxiety? What is this awareness that knows anxiety is present? Where is this consciousness that registers the feeling? And in asking these questions, in turning attention back to awareness itself, you may discover something that no amount of anxiety management could ever provide: the recognition of what you truly are beyond all anxiety, beyond all fear, beyond all the struggles of the separate self. You may discover that you are the peace you have been seeking, the security you have been trying to achieve, the home you have been trying to find. Not something you need to get to or become, but what you are right now, beneath all the anxiety, beneath all the seeking, beneath all the striving. Simply this, simply here, simply aware. And in this recognition, anxiety reveals itself as what it always was: a wave in the ocean of consciousness, unable to disturb the ocean itself, arising and passing away, while the ocean remains eternally at peace. This is the gift that anxiety brings, if you are willing to receive it. Not comfort, not reassurance, not the elimination of all challenge and difficulty, but something far more valuable.